Hey, this is Chris Chansey, and I want to share with you how God has shaped my relationship with Him through my business. So, we started Amplio Recruiting 5 years ago. We help refugees who have resettled in the U.S. find jobs with companies around the country. And when we started, we said, hey, there's an ample amount of dependable employees from the refugee community looking for work, and there's an ample amount of jobs available in the market, companies that are desperate to hire dependable people. So, we're going to match these two up, and we're going to see a lot of success from doing this. And so the model at that point wasn't a full-fledged staffing company. It was simply, hey, I've got someone that meets your job description. Will you pay me a flat fee in return for helping you find this person? And in the blue-collar, entry-level kind of space that I was working in, there was just no precedent for that. So we helped about 75, 80 people get a job in that first year and a half, and we didn't make a dime. So a year and a half of working and trying to make this whole business successful, and I got nowhere. And so I talked to lots of staffing companies and searched everything I could online to try to figure out a path forward. But at the end of the day, had nothing to really show for it. And so I said, hey, it's been a year and a half. I'm not going to regret shutting things down at this point, but I want to step back and learn from what's happened and see if there's something that I missed. So 2 weeks into completely shutting the business down, we got a phone call. And that phone call came from a gentleman who worked at a company down the road. He said, hey, I've heard about what you're doing. I want to hire 40 refugees at this company, but I need you to cover the workers' comp and manage the payroll. And I said, hey, thanks for the call, but we actually went out of business because we couldn't do the things you just described. Anybody I talked to about trying to become a full-fledged staffing company to manage workers' comp and payroll would say, hey, it's too complicated. Net 30-day payments are too complex. Just focus on what you're doing and you'll figure it out. But here I was having to turn down what seemed like a good opportunity. And I said, hey, thanks for the call, but there's nothing we can do. And he said, I'll give you 3 days to figure it out. And he hung up the phone. So in that moment, I am just in shock. I'm like, God, what are you doing? I've asked you over time and time again to give me favor, to bless this business, and you over my shoulder saying, God, please engage with me in this work. And I didn't really feel like I saw your presence. What are you doing now? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And I'm staring at my computer screen thinking, what can I Google that I haven't already searched for to figure this out? And I looked down at my phone, and there was a notification that popped on my phone that I had a phone call scheduled for that very moment. And it was a phone call I'd scheduled 2 weeks prior, and it was a guy I did not know. And I completely forgot that this was scheduled. So all I knew was that it was a guy from Chicago who was a business guy, and he wanted to talk about microfinance. So my previous work had been with Hope International, and actually was still working full-time for Hope at this point in launching the staffing company. And so I put aside everything about staffing and refugees and got on the phone with this gentleman from Chicago, and he says, hey, I just sold a successful staffing agency here in Chicago, and now I'm serving as a consultant for startup staffing agencies. So when he said that, my jaw hit the floor, and I just remember zoning out for a moment, and in my mind there was this pivotal moment where God changed positions for me. He had always been over my shoulder, God, please help me in this business. He changed positions from being over my shoulder to being directly in front of me, to being that cloud by day, fire by night, lead me on kind of God that I can completely depend on in my work. And so as I clicked back into the moment, I got to talk a lot about microfinance with this gentleman, but at the end of the call, I said, now I'd actually love to talk to you a little bit about staffing. And I shared with him everything that had happened for the past year and a half up to that very moment of just receiving the phone call prior, and just spilled my guts about this process. And so I finished all of that, and he says, hey, if you want to be ready in 3 days, there's ways to make that happen. And I said, I've got nothing to lose. Let's go for it. So 3 days later, I called the company back, and I said, hey, we're ready to go. We can do what you asked for us. We can cover workers' comp and manage the payroll. And the guy said, no, you can't. There's no way. And I said, yeah, we're ready to go. I can prove it. Just give us a chance. And so it took roughly a month later before we placed the first individual at that company. It's been 3.5 years since then, and we still have relationships with that client. And since then, we've just seen this explosion of recognition of the refugee workforce and the impact that they can have in companies across the country. And so I share that story not because it was just this moment and everything's been perfect since then. Of course, we've had plenty of challenges and we're still trying to figure things out. But there's this recognition of what God's position is in our pursuit after business. God did more in those 2 phone calls in the span of about 10 minutes than I'd been able to accomplish on my own trying to white knuckle everything for a year and a half. And so I just recognize more and more my dependence on God, even in the workplace, even in the business. And I hope that never goes away. And I encourage you to really consider that for yourselves. Where is God's position in your business, and how can you ensure that it stays that way, that you position yourself and the company in a way in which you're completely dependent on Him?